I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the applied science and bewitchery of brand and business storytelling, so that you can clarify your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
In 2013, I was quizzing 35 or so internationally renowned sustainability executives about what they would like to see in graduates from the new Executive Masters of Sustainability Leadership program we were creating at Arizona State University. This was a day-long session where my three fellow professors and I pulled insights from these busy executives who flew in for just the one day to help us develop our curriculum. Of the four of us, I was the last to take the stage following sessions on sustainability strategy, global context, and leadership. Once I was introduced as the communications professor, specifically focused on sustainable storytelling, I saw several of these very serious professionals fold their arms. "Oh, the soft skills guy," I heard one of them quip. It had never occurred to me until that moment that there was a battle in many executives' heads that measurable technical hard skills were better than those squishy communications relationship soft skills. But as Bob Dylan prophesized,
"Oh, the times they are a-changin'."
The World Economic Forum just announced this week the 10 most in-demand skills in business, according to LinkedIn. The findings parallel their own Future of Jobs report. Both conclude that human skills like originality, initiative, and critical thinking are increasing in value as technology and automation advances. The report states that with the fourth industrial revolution, advances with technologies like automation and algorithms, employers are seeking a greater mix of skills. LinkedIn said the top soft skills are creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, and time management. In my 35 years building brands and my last decade focused on coaching and teaching business storytelling to sometimes reluctant executives, I feel, smugly vindicated because I've witnessed how, when you strengthen your communication capabilities through storytelling, you inherently build on each one of these sought-after soft skills. Storytelling is the ultimate creative hack because you don't have to come up with some brilliant design or spellbinding copy or some amazing user UX experience. Just share a well-told story about a real-world event that your audience can relate to, and you will have them bewitched. Storytelling is the most persuasive form of communication. I mean, when you think about it, when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? Or when was the last time you bought anything because of the data? You don't. You buy it because of the story. So if you want to build your influence and you're becoming more persuasive in the process, then build your narrative muscles. Now, I call storytelling the Velcro of collaboration because it's really what brings and sticks two worlds together. Think about it. When we take the time to understand and empathize with the journey the person is on sitting across from us, it establishes common ground and spurs collaboration. And every story begins with understanding and empathy. I've also found executives well-versed in the art of storytelling to be more adaptable to people, problems, situations, and opportunities. Why? Because their understanding and empathy results in appreciation for what needs to happen next. And what needs to happen next often requires her to be open to adapting to the new situation for the greater good. Finally, becoming an intentional storyteller using proven narrative frameworks will actually save you time. I mean, you not only get to your point a lot quicker, but you make it easy for your readers, your listeners, or those audiences attending your presentations to get your content. Now, I don't have time right now to give you an example of all of these points, so I posted a new blog on businessofstory.com with anecdotes that demonstrate how, by growing your storytelling muscles, you will automatically become more creative, more persuasive, collaborative, adaptable, and get more done in less time. That's why I urge you to clarify your storytelling, to amplify your impact, and ultimately simplify your life. Well, on today's show, we're going to focus on clarifying your story with none other than the king of clarity, Steve Woodruff. Steve helps individuals and businesses discover their professional DNA, define their offerings, target their ideal clients, and articulate their differentiating message. And he's authored a brand new book called Clarity Wins, which has already become an Amazon #1 new release. I thought our conversation was just going to be about his work and helping people clarify their brand stories until I unwittingly asked him to work his magic on me. Steve takes me and my brand story about the business of story through his 5 classic questions. I think after the recording session, he called me a generous host, which is a way of saying that I had to really lay myself out and be vulnerable, that even I had to continue to clarify my storytelling. And you know what? You get to come along for the ride to try these 5 questions on your brand and business storytelling as well. And what better time? Just ask LinkedIn. Storytelling is the sought-after soft skill in business. And I, for one, believe it kicks the crap out of all those hard skills. So let's get rolling with the king of clarity, Steve Woodruff. Steve, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Park. It's a pleasure.
So you've been in this branding, advertising, marketing business for what, 30 years? Was that
over 30 years? I've been working on selling, branding, marketing, all with small companies or on my own. And so I get to wear all the hats.
And what got you to where you are today, where you are specifically focused on clarity?
What really got me there was I did a lot of marketing and branding with the small companies I worked with. But when I went out on my own 12 years ago to create this matchmaking consultancy, I had to sit down with small vendor companies and help them figure out what their message was, because they all were sounding the same. You know, we do this and this and this and this. And they'd all throw the same bullet points against the wall.
And what kind of small vendor companies were these, and what industries?
These were training providers for commercial, pharma, and biotech, very specific niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked in that niche for 10 years with a online learning, online testing vendor company. So I knew the niche, I knew the problem, and I knew the gap that existed between the vendors and what they were trying to say and what the trainers were hearing. And most of what they were hearing was it all sounded the same. So if I was going to be an intelligent matchmaker and refer them, I needed to know what made these companies different. So I'd sit down with these different smaller companies for a couple hours, 2-3 hours, sometimes a full day. And in that time, we'd get them completely figured out, get their focus clear, get their message clear, get their differentiation clear. And it was just this capability that I had. And for some of these companies, they had been in business 10, 15 years. They'd never had a clear message before. They didn't even know where they were differentiated. They needed an outside voice to come in and sort through everything and then say, you know, here's really your best opportunity. Here's your strong suit. Here's your sweet spot. And let's craft a message for that. So I started doing this clarity consulting as a subset of my referral network. And then it just took on a life of its own. And now I do it with all kinds of companies and individuals. It doesn't really matter what the industry is. The need for a clear focus and a clear identity and a clear message is a universal business need.
So this was simply born out of first your necessity to be able to understand who these providers were and how you could communicate this to your clients. And then you found that these providers weren't clear. So you were even having a hard time figuring out who they were, how to position them, and who was probably the best to choose from.
Yeah, my conviction with every company, it's been this way for a long time, is that every company has a strong suit somewhere. They have something that is going to be the sweet spot. So the challenge is to tease it out, to separate the wheat from the chaff, and to say, okay, here's really what differentiates you. Why don't you put your focus there and go after the best business, not go after all the business, because that's really inefficient and it's just poor stewardship of abilities. But what I found was many of these companies were just grabbing any business they can because, revenue. And that is a race to the commodity bottom of the ladder when you do that. So it's a liberating thing for these companies to get clarity on what they're best at.
So was this kind of a superpower of your own that found you before this, were you doing a lot of work in the advertising branding world?
I was doing it accidentally as a key person in a couple of small businesses that didn't have full-time marketing or branding. I just did it because I liked it. And so the branding and marketing and consulting part was just something that was native in me. And it had opportunity because I was working in these small companies to just sort of emerge out. And it turns out it really was my strong suit, much more than selling. I still, after all these years, I still have to sell, but I would rather consult and I would rather work on messaging and strategy any day of the week than sell.
But you are a seller by working on that, aren't we? I had that same misgivings when I started in the advertising business. The media reps would show up and I would say, oh, those terrible salespeople. I would never do that, only to realize my whole entire profession was nothing but selling in one form or another. You had to do this clarity thing first, just for yourself and for your client. But how did you realize, or when did you realize you were onto something here and it would grow into a practice and a book you've written?
I realized it when I would be sitting down with a company and deconstructing them as an outside voice, and then come up with some kind of message or focus, and I'd see the light go on in the eyes of the people I was talking with. It was like this epiphany. And then, Park, it started to also happen with individuals, people that were in career transition, people that were solopreneurs. Same process. Because if you think about it, the way you're branding yourself in a career move is you've got to get in touch with your identity. You've got to have a clear focus and you got to have a clear message. So I started to do this process. I didn't even know what the process was at first. I actually had to backwards reconstruct it over years and come up with labels and steps because I was doing it intuitively. And it took me several years to actually trace the whole thing out and figure it out and come up with the structure that you now see in the book. I was just doing it by instinct at first. And then I realized what it was that I was doing and what the steps were. So it was fascinating for me. It wasn't something where just snap of the fingers, I knew what was going on. It took a while to figure out and get clarity about clarity.
Yeah, you became a brand anthropologist. I love that term. I didn't write that term, make that up, but I love it because I've experienced that same thing where you're just asking questions to help people arrive at who they are, instinctually and authentically. And then when they do, I've seen that exact same expression in clients' faces when you go, well, this is what you do and why you do it. And they're like, oh my God, how come you saw that and I didn't? And you have a phrase in your book that I love. I think it goes something like, because you are stuck inside the jar, therefore you can't read your own label, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I saw a piece of artwork come across my email some years ago from Hugh MacLeod, Gaping Void, and it said, You can't read the label of the jar you're in.
That's it.
And I saw that artwork and I said, dang, there it is. That is the core of what I do. And I ordered it. I am not an artwork guy. I ordered that thing, framed artwork, and put it behind my desk instantly because it was such a wonderful summary. And I've shown that and shared that with countless people. And that one phrase, you can't read the label of the jar you're in, has had so much impact on people understanding why you've got to have someone from the outside to help you sort through the forest and the trees.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of your, what do you call it, a verbal dot or a brand dart that says what you do?
Yeah, I believe very firmly in what I call in the book memory darts, which is my replacement for the old, and in my case, intensely disliked phrase, elevator pitch. I don't like elevator pitch for only two reasons. Number one, nobody wants to hear anything in an elevator. And two, it's not our job to pitch people when they're captives. So what I do like, though, is the ability to distill and encapsulate a message in such a way that it gets right into the memory and bypasses the filters of the brain. And I talk about three things that we can do for that. One is developing snippets, which are little phrases like you can't read the label of the jar you're in, stories, which I know you're very sympathetic to, and symbols, which are metaphors or word pictures that help people grasp immediately what we're talking about, because we can grab onto an existing memory hook and put our idea onto that other idea. The faster we can get our information into people's minds and overcome the resistance, the better that it can be for them to remember us and then eventually, as you alluded to earlier, to refer us.
And in your book, you take some time up top and talk about how our brains are hardwired, both for story, but maybe more importantly to your book and clarity, is this defense mechanism of sifting through the nonsense and the confusion. And if you don't have a clear story or a memory dart that you're working, that we ricochet off of our people's psyche, I guess, like a meteor ricocheting off an atmosphere.
Well, that's the challenge. And the brain, I do dip into a little bit of practical brain science in the book. And the brain has this wonderful capacity that keeps us all sane called the reticular activating system, or RAS. And the job of the RAS is the master filter. And the RAS is looking for whatever is new, highly relevant, frightening, amusing, something interesting. Everything else gets filtered out. And it's actually a survival mechanism. We have so much stimulation coming into us every day that we have to filter it out, and it's done unconsciously by the RAS. But what that means is if the RAS is filtering out noise continuously, this abundance of noise and distraction, then our biggest challenge as a business or an individual is to rise above the noise. How do I get through the RAS? And the only way to do that is quickly, vividly, being memorable, being new, being interesting. And you only have about 15 or 30 seconds to make it happen, or you're just noise.
Mm-hmm. So take us through your process. We're sitting down with someone. What does a listener need to start doing now to start clarifying their message?
Well, the process I use, it's a very intensive deep dive, and it's usually one-on-one or one with a very small group. And I use story to extract information. So when I'm sitting down with somebody, I ask a ton of questions, and I especially ask for stories. What worked well when you did this? What kind of environment did you really shine in? Where did you have failure? What was a success? Tell me about a customer you really loved. And what I'm doing in the first hour and a half, 2 hours is pretty messy. It looks completely undirected, but I've used the analogy of dumping M&Ms on the table. We're just dumping all the M&Ms on the table, and you got this random bunch of stuff. But then what always happens is certain key phrases, words, and ideas begin to emerge. And I start rearranging, let's get all the yellows over here. Let's get all the blues over here. And Park, there are these themes that for every company or individual, you start to see, you obviously really love this. You've really succeeded in this. This kind of customer didn't work for this reason. And it's sorting through all that raw material that is embedded in these stories to say, here's what really emerges as your sweet spot. And one of the things I love doing is working with individuals and companies that are what I call multi-talented. They do 5 things well, so it's even harder to figure out. But there's always something there that's really the best. And to extract that out and then say, okay, this is your core, this is your sweet spot. Now, how would your business look if you could just emphasize that and working with this type of customer and package it this way? And that's the goal of clarity, is to try to narrow it down and actually proactively pigeonhole yourself to the right kind of work.
And I would imagine you get pushback from clients because I've been through that situation myself with Michael Gass, who came in and worked with our agency back in 2008 to help us with some positioning. And I had that same fear of, you're going to get me so focused, so singular, so pigeonholed that I'm going to miss out on a bunch of business. But that's
my
not
goal.
actually what
that's
happens.
Actually correct. I want you to miss out on a bunch of business. Mm-hmm. I want you to miss out on the wrong business.
Right.
Because not every customer is a good customer. Not all business is good business. And what we have to be brave enough to do is to say, I'm going to say yes to this subset, and I'm going to say no to the stuff that's a distraction to me. And in fact, in the book, I make the point, you actually have to remove the negative connotations that we all natively have about being pigeonholed, and you need to embrace it because you create the pigeonhole. It's not a matter of people randomly putting you in a pigeonhole. You are putting yourself in the best pigeonhole. And because people can't remember you for 5 different things, they're going to remember you for one thing. It needs to be the right thing. And so I want to plant that in their minds. I don't want them to randomly store me in their head because I said the word sales as, oh, that's a sales guy. No, that's not the right idea. So I've got to say, here's my ideal pigeonhole. Here's the type of customer I want, and here's the type of work I do if I hope to just be doing the most profitable ideal work.
Steve, can you take us to a time or a client that you were taking through the process and you both arrived at that aha moment that maybe surprised them, but even for you, kind of surprised you or gratified you, almost like you are like that anthropologist and you're uncovering and you find the holy grail for that client? Because I know that feeling. Can you take us to one of those moments?
Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling. I was working about a month and a half ago with a consultant, and what I have seen happen many, many times in my time with my pharmaceutical groups is you'll have people that leave the pharma companies and jump over to what we call the dark side, the vendor side. And they decide they're going to hang up a shingle and be a consultant. And the problem that happens, and I see it all the time, is they become generalists. I'll do this for you, and I'll do that. I'll do leadership development, and I can do launch training. I can do blah, 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 blah. And they fall right immediately into the trap of I can do everything. Because at some point in their career, they have done everything. Mm-hmm. So I was talking with one gentleman who was going out on his own, and he'd come up with a proto message. And so we started talking it through, and what we narrowed it down to was that he could provide very quick turnaround, hands-on workshop development for people that had meetings, live meetings coming up, and they needed somebody that was an expert at live workshop development. And we found a couple of particular angles that he had. And in a matter of a few hours, we got him better differentiated And he was really excited about his message, and he's done a great job promoting it. We got him better differentiated than most of all the other training providers in our sector. But because I was aware of where the holes were in the marketplace, I could tell him with confidence, if you go after this hole, you're not going to have much competition because everybody else is going after bigger or other things. And one of my goals in working with anybody on clarity is, can we find a blue ocean or a subset or a piece of the market that you're going to have very little competition in, and then go after that?
And what was his take on that? I mean, at some point, was he saying like, again, Steve, I'm afraid to get too focused because I'm going to lose out on this other business? Or did he buy into it once you really connected
totally.
with this?
He totally bought into it. I mean, he had his website up the next day, different wording. He completely changed his messaging. He said, I'm the chief doer. You're going to, when you hire me, you're not going to get, somebody else, some subordinate. He took the potential negative of being a solo practitioner, and he turned it around and said, you're going to get the guy with 25 years experience. I'm going to come in. And we even put a regional basis on it because he was one guy. And we focused on the region of the country where he was in to even further narrow down his niche, because there were plenty of companies in that region. He didn't need to go fly across the country to do this. He had plenty of fish in his own pond. Mm-hmm. So we made it to the point where he could have a very doable strategy with a very doable set of clients in his backyard and occupy a hole in the marketplace.
And he called himself the chief doer?
Chief doer. Because what would happen many times is a salesperson would come in from one of these bigger training companies and say, oh yeah, we can do that. And then they don't know who they're really going to get doing the project management or the instructional design or the facilitation. It could be good, could be bad. But in this case, they're getting the guy, the expert. So no passing the buck, no question what kind of quality you're going to get.
Yeah, so he's the chief doer. You are the king of clarity. How important is it? And is this an example of one of your memory darts for a person to clarify their story and then label it somehow like that?
Absolutely. It's one of the most important and wonderful things you can do. I didn't come up with King of Clarity, but I did exploit it when somebody wrote it on my timeline. Chris Brogan, a couple of years ago on Facebook on my birthday, said, "Happy birthday to the King of Clarity." And I looked at that and I said, dang, that's got some legs. And it was a little against my New England upbringing to take on a title like that because it sounds so arrogant and egomaniacal. But I just loved the branding. So I took it and ran with it. And sure enough, it's become such a memorable thing. And the fact is, there's only one king, and I've declared myself to be that.
Yeah. It's aspirational, not egotistical. I didn't take it as egotistical when I read it. I just thought, you know what? Good point. He is the king of clarity.
Well, I had deliberately chosen the word clarity over branding because nobody can own branding, but clarity was a word that was kind of waiting for somebody to own it. So I decided some years ago to own it. And King of Clarity, then a few years ago came on the scene, and it's been a kind of a genius. But the gentleman who did my editing of my book, Josh Burnoff, who's a very well-known writer, and he's also a ghost writer and an editor, a blogger. He loves clear writing, so he's very much sympathetic with my position. But he's a high-end guy, and he's very expensive, and I was willing to make the investment to have his editing skills on my book. And so we were going back and forth about some of the content of the book, and I said, we need some kind of memory dart for you. And so I called him the Mercedes of book editors, which he later modified to Tesla because he really wanted to be Tesla. But if you say the Tesla of business book editors, what you're saying is high-end, exclusive. You're implying expensive. You're implying, this is someone that if you're really serious and you're willing to invest. And just by grabbing an existing memory hook, Tesla or Mercedes, I can get the message, or he can get the message across in one little phrase, and it paints the right picture. And that's how to get remembered in people's minds.
So I would imagine you need to go through the process a little bit more before you can really arrive at that powerful memory dart or memory hook. And sometimes it even comes from the outside in, which is fine too, because when it hits you upside the head, you're like, there it is.
Yep.
You've got in your book the 5 elements of clarity. Can you take us through those quickly so that our listeners can start thinking about their own story and their own memory hook? But, let's take them intentionally through these 5 steps.
Yeah, in defining what your business niche is, I shamelessly stole from the classic questions of journalism on what makes a good story. And it turns out that if you take 5 of those elements, those simple questions, they really do define a brand. So I start with what. We're going to define what exactly is it that you do, and try to put that into clear, simple, human-ready language, not business jargon. And business jargon means we align strategies with tactics to optimize the end-to-end blah, 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 blah. No, that's all crap. And I hate jargon. Everybody knows it. So the what has to be a very plain and simple and precise description. Then there's the for whom. And what we're doing with the for whom is we're trying to paint the picture of the exact ideal client that's best for me, what they feel, what their business pain or aspiration is, even what their title is. I want it down to the point where if I'm walking down the street in my neighborhood and I come across somebody and they say, hey, I'm the director of marketing with so-and-so, and they give me a title and they tell me about a business need, I immediately think, oh, I need to connect them with Frank, because that's exactly the type of person they serve. That's part of the being referral ready. Mm-hmm. So the second thing is the for whom. The third thing is the why. What is the actual need, pain, hope? What is it that people feel, that people need, that makes whatever it is I offer something compelling and something that they would open their wallet for? It has got to be something that has both typically a financial and an emotional component to the why. And so that is taking the, when people talk about features and benefits, and that's always very nice, but we have to get beyond features and benefits to what's driving somebody to spend money to fix something. The fourth question is the how, and that's where we talk about the superpower. So here's what my differentiating skill is. Here's what my company's particular ability or sweet spot or offering is that makes us the best choice for this. And you got to have the differentiator. And so that needs to be spelled out. And then finally is the where. The where is, do I do my work locally? Do I do it regionally? Is it all just US? Is it global? Is it virtual? Is it this vertical marketplace only? Is it this particular HR function only? And many times that is not well defined. It's left vague and cloudy, which means that people end up pursuing business in the places where they shouldn't, or getting referrals that really aren't interesting for their particular, where they do their work. So once you go through the exercise of understanding your what, your for whom, your why, your how, and your where, you've got the 5 cornerstones of clarity, not only of message, but of strategic direction for your business. So this goes beyond just messaging. This goes right to what's our destination, what's our GPS, what's our roadmap. That's what these 5 questions are all about.
Okay, so I went through these in your book and I applied them to me in the business of story. Can I bounce them off you and you can coach me a little bit and the listeners along the way?
Sure, if you've got a thick skin.
Yeah, bring it. No, you know how it is. I'm in my own jar. I'm having a hard time reading my label. Not even sure how big my jar is sometimes. So I say bring it. Bloody me up if you like. Whatever works. So this is a clarity card you've got in your book, and you've shared it on how you used it for your own business, but readers can go through and certainly fill it out for themselves. So my what is Park helps leaders of purpose-driven brands clarify their stories to amplify their impact and simplify their lives. My for whom which I was a little bit confused with this because I said it earlier, leaders of purpose-driven brands, but my for whom is for the unsung heroes who understand and appreciate the power of storytelling to grow themselves, their companies, and their people. And I've learned that, Steve, over the years of doing this, that I'm not for everybody. The people that get the most out of what I bring to the business and their business are people who already have an appreciation for story, and they say, I know we can use this in the business. I need someone to come in and help us activate that because people aren't listening to me. So I need that outside person coming in. Why? But they need an advocate and a mentor to help them and their people understand how to use the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling to grow their businesses and their people. How? Well, I deploy the proven 10-step story cycle system that is only available through the business of story, a system that I created based on the hero's journey. And then finally, where do I do this? Well, I think I'm going to certainly fail here, but I said, given the universality of storytelling and what I've experienced, this system has literally been deployed around the world. Now, most of my work is done in North America, but I do work in several countries long distance using this. So I was wanting, even in my writing of this, to get more focused on it, and I thought maybe you could help me with that. So if we've got a couple minutes, can we go from the top, and how did I do?
Well, first off, your how is your strongest one there, because on your how, you have alluded to a magic formula. And one of the things that any service provider wants to have is a magic formula or some kind of proprietary set of steps. So your how is very strong. Each of the others needs some work, but what I try to arrive at with the 5 phrases is I want to arrive at factual statements first, and most of yours are still at a factual level, and then make them nice and sparkly snippets that are easier to digest and human ready. So right now you've got pretty decent at factual level. We'd have to clean up a number of things there to make them exactly right, but your how is awesome. But let's go right to the top. Read me your what again.
Park helps leaders of purpose-driven brands clarify their stories to amplify their impact and simplify their lives.
Tell me why that matters. It sounds aspirationally lovely, but so what?
It matters because focused journeys are how you grow brands, grow businesses, and grow the people that work for you.
Okay. This still sounds a little vague to me. Little cloudy, a little woo-woo.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get that what. By the way, I do like the parallelism of the phrasing with the amplify and the simplify, and that has a lot of potential. That's got great potential.
Clarify, amplify, simplify. Yes, I use that quite a bit, but maybe it's still too woo-woo.
It's a little woo-woo unless we make it more concrete. So if we went to something like this, we help brands clarify, amplify, and simplify their message so that customers can remember their stories or can enter into their stories or something like that. That gives us the potential because we've got to have some kind of benefit in there. We've got to speak about why this matters, and why it matters ultimately is that we want to grow our business. We want to win customers. And so what's in it for me for amplify, simplify? It's got to have some kind of payoff right there, off the bat on the what. So I want to move beyond good intentions into, oh, you're going to help me reach into the minds of my customers. Okay, I get that. Your current for whom is very vague right now because you'd have to define what we're talking about with the unspoken heroes and whatever. So the for whom I would make more tangible as for any brand leader who's ready to rise above the noise by strategically and skillfully employing stories. Very simple. It's got to be simple. And right now it's a little bit windy and abstract, which is, I understand the windy and abstract point, but when we're getting down to these snippets, it's got to appeal to the person that's never heard of storytelling before. Doesn't understand.
See, and that would be my argument there is I'm not appealing to those. I don't want people that have never heard from storytelling before. My best market are those that do understand story. They do get it, and their organizations just aren't using it, and they're not being heard. They're not being listened to internally. Or I get brands that come to me and say, look, we don't have a clear story. Story's important. I get it, but ours is not clear. Come and help us do it. So, Steve, I made this determination earlier this year is I'm not for those who I have to sell on the power of storytelling.
Yep.
I'm for those that get it already and they want to implement it in their businesses.
So then you could say something like the for whom is for brand storytellers currently trapped in organizations that that need to become more effective using stories or something like that. The vividry of the language, you're already saying you're a brand storyteller and you're trapped in an organization, or you're alone in an organization, but that you've got this inside knowledge, you've got this inside purpose, and Park's going to come alongside and be my guide and my helper. So if you want to do it that way, then you have to paint the portrait of somebody, but it has to be very clear. They're already a storyteller. They're already somebody that gets it, and so the wording would have to be even clearer than it is now, and that person could self-identify immediately. Yeah, I love this story stuff, and I'm kind of alone here, and I need somebody to help me spread this thing.
Yeah, and it's really funny. Over the last 3 years of being focused solely on business of story, I started, like everybody does, is trying to be all things to all people and selling people on the power of story, only to find out my most fervent fans and referral base are those who have hired me precisely because of that. I get story. I understand it. My people don't. And I need an advocate or a mentor to come in and help me progress this in our business.
So you could even use more vivid language like storytelling evangelists who need an advocate to spread the good news in their company. Boom.
Yeah.
And so you've already identified them, not only as somebody that understands stories, but they want to be evangelists. They want to make this thing happen. But they need some help. They need, they need the apostle of stories to come in there and help, spread this thing. And if that is indeed your target market, then that's a way to use more vivid imagery to paint that picture of those people.
I love it. I'm starting to see the label a little bit more out of my jar.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you've already identified that you don't want to do the evangelistic work yourself of getting a brand to understand story from nowhere. You want people that are already converts, but they're lonely and they need your help. They need the itinerant evangelist to come in and help them, internally. That's a wonderful positioning because you're sorting through. You've already sorted out like 90% of the potential market of people whose ears are closed and have no idea. But there are these other people. And if you can paint that picture in my mind as a potential referral partner, then I'm not going to send you into wastelands where nobody knows nothing. I'm going to send you to a person who loves storytelling and just needs some help.
Yeah. And it's funny, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have gone through this too. We've all experienced it where we're eager to sell and share our experience and what we know to help people grow. And I had 3 meetings late last year and early this year where I was called in big brands here in Phoenix. And I was so sure I was going to land, a nice training gig for them. When I got there, Steve, they sat at the table and they would look at me and said, well, we've been hearing something about this story thing going on, and we don't really know if we should do it or not. And so sell us. And I had 3 rotten meetings. It wasted my time. And I didn't sell them. And when I left there, I realized I don't want to sell them.
Right.
I want people that have already, self-assessed that I know this storytelling works. I need someone to help me make it work within our organization.
Very interesting. I like that. That's good position.
Yeah. So
And so let's take just a brief run at the why. Tell me, what would be the biggest advantage of a company embracing this storytelling framework in their organization?
the biggest advantage, if they are going to embrace it internally for internal communications, it literally helps them to create camaraderie among their people and getting people pulling in the same direction by
Mm,
understanding and living into the same story, or
mm,
enough of the stories that follow the same narrative. So it's clarity of purpose, which amplifies, of course, the relationships and the impact that they can have. And as you say in your book so well too, it literally simplifies their life because they know what to say no to and what to
mm.
say yes to.
Okay. So to put it in corporate terms, then uh, alignment and collaboration are strengthened through a storytelling framework within the company,
Mm-hmm.
because that people buy alignment, they buy collaboration skills, they buy internal communications. So if you can attach the why to something that has cost justification already, but you just say, hey, you want these things, but let me tell you how it is that storytelling is what will help bring it about. Now you have already tied it to something people are spending money
And it's funny because that's what they come to me to, and they don't even know it necessarily.
on.
They
Correct.
basically say, I know we can be doing better. I'm just not sure what, but you're exactly right. It is alignment, collaboration, camaraderie. I need to get them all pulling in the same direction. And I'm willing to invest in that.
Correct. And then you have the advantage, and I use this phrase in my book, that our brains are hardwired for story. You can say, listen, go with biology, man, go with science. Our brains are hardwired for story.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that we're going to pound this into people with PowerPoint presentations and SOPs. No, it's going to be story. And then you've got this inevitability to your message. And that's what you want. You want the inevitability, especially at the why level, that, like, you can't fight me on this. This is the way it is. And so by embracing what I'm telling you and going this way, you're going to be riding a wave that's already coming to shore.
Mm-hmm. And then the one thing I did get right, apparently, the how, and I totally get that, because it is a platform. It is something that I've created out of studying Hollywood, studying screenwriting, studying branding, having done it for 35 years. And my story cycle system that I've created works everywhere on every level, from high level brand strategy right down to the exact same steps for tactical execution. And of course, I've got the case studies to prove it. So I'm very confident when I can go in and say, look at, and I'm going to take you through the proven 10-step story cycle system. And here are 100 of other people that have gone through it, and here are the results that they've gotten.
Yep. It's very powerful when your how has something that's kind of exclusive and proprietary to it, when there's a method to it, when there's a series of steps to it, and when you've got a track record. That's the best. People will pay for a system. If you just say, I'm going to come in and wave a magic wand and everybody will be aligned, you know what? I don't think so.
Yeah, you're so right. And then that final question on the where, it is, to me, that was very squishy too. There is universality to storytelling. But honestly, the work that I've done most recently that has really gotten traction, Steve, is working with brands that have also already done their branding. And maybe I haven't even had a hand in that, but they are trying to get all of their communications teams or their different offices all on the same board within that branding. So my understanding of the brand world, I totally get what they're trying to do. And I use this process. It's an 8-week deliberate practice program where I bring all their people together, the constituents of that brand that need to buy into it. And this might be a new branding campaign or whatever. Take them through a half-day workshop. Here is what you are to look for. Here are the kinds of stories you are going to find to support this brand. And here's the framework to be intentional about how you tell these stories. And then every week for the next 7 weeks, They get a story assignment from me on Monday that they have to execute on behalf of the brand. And it could be anything from actually spotting, finding stories, to sharing them internally, to teaching other people within the organization the same tactics that I'm teaching them, because of course you don't know what you know until you teach it. So at the end of this 2-month period, hopefully we've not only built some storytelling muscles, but we have created the habit. They start thinking in more narrative structure and that sort of thing. And it's a niche that I've not seen any other agency, and I'm not an agency anymore. I ran one for 20 years. But it's a place where a brand comes up with like a branded campaign or this new brand, and they got to get buy-in internally. And I have found that this is extraordinarily successful in helping them get buy-in because, number one, it teaches people individually how to become stronger communicators through story. Number two, it gets them looking for stories that support the new brand so they can say, oh, wow, you're not just making this brand up. This is really who we are. Look, I've got 5 stories that demonstrate it. And then number 3, it's a content creator because all these stories become potential content for inbound marketing, outbound marketing, even internal communications.
Yeah, so I would put that as brands that want to align all their stakeholders and support their brand message through effective storytelling. And it doesn't really have to be Phoenix, doesn't have to be North America. Sometimes the where is not as much geographical as it is a kind of a here's the location, the address, theoretically. And it's this type of client, it's this type of situation. And in that case, I like the fact that if there's some blue ocean there of taking an existing brand, you're not redoing their message, you're just going to bring about reinforcement and alignment of all the stakeholders through this method, then you've got a wide field to play in there. And it doesn't really matter where they're located.
Yeah, and it's really 3 different levels of branding. Sometimes it is branding that I've done on their behalf. They have a brand new brand story to get people to buy into. There's that. But then there's another one like Grand Canyon University out here, one of the fastest growing for-profit universities in the country, launching a new brand campaign, not revising their brand, but a new campaign in second quarter next year, and be working with them and their team to get 120 of them aligned and on board so that everybody's buying into it. They have ownership of it, but they're finding that content to push it out. And then thirdly, it's someone who just says, I've already got the brand. I'm not actually launching any great brand campaign at this point, but I got to get people aligned.
Yeah, well, the keywords that are coming up as I look at the M&Ms that you're putting on the table is buy-in, alignment, and ownership. And I think that's where you got to focus. You got to say, listen, whether you need a new brand or whether you have an existing brand, you need buy-in, alignment, and ownership, and that's what we create. And so I think you've actually got a really cool offering. Because if you can come in and say, we can work with you to make sure that everybody's all on board and we use the story framework to create that buy-in, whether it's for a campaign, whether it's for a total rebranding, a new company, whatever it is, I think that's a very, very strong offering and probably quite differentiating. I don't know how many agencies offer that particular type of how to embed the brand in the sea of stakeholders that need to actually everybody needs to buy in and think and feel and say the same thing.
Yeah. Well, what else I like about it too, and I have been brought in by other agencies, is now no longer being an agency, but understanding their world. I'm not a threat to them. And in fact, I can make them even stronger when they are launching brands. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be in a position where you're not competing as much as possible. So in this case, you're helping the brand, you're helping the agency. You could say, I could come in and do your brand for you if you want, but if you've got an existing brand, I'm not going to replace it. I'm just going to strengthen it. And that way, everybody loves you, which is a wonderful place to be.
I love it when everybody loves me.
That's right.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate it. And folks, this is why you have your own podcast, because you get to learn from the very best and very brightest minds. And I got to tell you, I don't typically focus an episode on myself like this, but I also wanted to make it clear to our audiences that, even though maybe you've listened to me for a long time and you're thinking, geez, well, Park's a brand storyteller. How come he can't get his own act together on his own brand story? Well, I can, but I can't. And that's where Steve comes in, and that's where his book comes in. And if you are floundering and trying to figure out and clarify your story, man, the first thing I would do is send you out and pick up this book. Clarity Wins, Get Heard, Get Referred, just on off the shelf. What, you launched this in November, I guess.
Yes, it's on Amazon, and I've made a short link called claritywins.org that leads directly to the Amazon page for the book.
claritywins.org. And where can people learn more about you and the work that you do?
My website for my Clarity consulting work is clarityfuel, FUEL.com. And the way that I work with clients is I typically have half-day or full-day sessions, depending on whether it's a single person or a career or startup, or if it's an existing company. And as with you, I can do clarity basically with just about anybody, but there has to be a hunger for change. That's kind of like, if you want to describe the demographic, somebody that says, man, I'm not clear. There's fog here. I'm not quite sure my direction. I know I'm not communicating effectively. I must change. Now I can work with that person. I don't care what industry they're in. If somebody is arrogant, full of themselves, and doesn't want to take input, I can't work with them.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's like those that sit there and say, sell me on story. And if you do, then I'll hire you. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
No, I want to work as you do. Somebody that's got some sympathy that's already there. For me, if somebody is hungry for success and hungry to have a clear vision and to really understand where they're going, I can work with that person.
And do you prefer to work one-on-one, face-to-face, or can you do it long distance?
I can do it long distance. I've actually done a number of half-day clarity sessions over Skype or Zoom. And so that works quite well. In fact, I've done clarity sessions with people in Australia before, for crying out loud. But if it's with a company, and if there's more than one person and we're looking at a full-blown, strategic review of where the direction is, I prefer to do that live. And so I've flown into different places where people have paid me to come in and spend a day. And that works quite well also. So it just depends on where people are. I have a number of people in the greater Nashville area that I've worked with because it's a little easier for me to drive someplace. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to go to where people are if they need to have a group meeting.
Okay, now I'm really going to push my luck here. My good fortune of having you on the show. Steve, after working through me and my business of story, what would be my memory hook?
Oh, boy. Let's see. I'm going to go back through a few M&Ms here and rearrange the yellow ones a little bit. This is not a refined memory hook, but it's the proto beginning of it. You're the brand reinforcement guy. So what you do is you create this ability to get this buy-in, to get this spreading of the brand, somehow to make a brand, to get everybody on the same brand platform. And story happens to be the way that you do it, but it goes beyond just storytelling. Storytelling is your mechanism. I wouldn't want to put you as just the storytelling guy because that's a commodity. There are other storytelling guys. Mm-hmm. But your storytelling, it has a particular business application, which is somehow bringing this alignment and buy-in of a brand and letting it spread in this new way. It would take me some time to think through what the analogy would be or the metaphor, but that's the direction I would go. I wouldn't just say storytelling. I'd focus on that purpose, that outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You said brand reinforcement, another way to say that, brand buy-in.
Yes.
But even that's still a little bit woo-woo, so I would have to work on that. What does that mean exactly? But I'm the brand buy-in guy. People would, I think, automatically think, oh, getting more customers to buy your stuff. Say, well, actually, it's getting your internal team to buy your brand story.
Yep. Yeah. Which may be a great way to explain it. Everybody thinks that the purpose of the brand is getting outside customers to buy into the brand. I'm the one that's going, oh, I like this now. This is starting to gel. I'm the one that's going to help get your internal team buying into your brand. And maybe that's the angle that you take, sometimes it takes an unexpected twist. Everybody talks about getting the outside world to buy your brand. What about the inside world to buy your brand?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, and that's such a pain point for so many companies. I was just speaking with one today, an international company here in Phoenix, and he said, we've got 7 people in our marketing department here in Scottsdale, but we got 15 over in London, and guess what? They want to handle our brand way differently than the designers of it, want to handle it. And I said, yep, that's where I come in.
And that's the importance of the clarity card, the snippets, the stories, the symbols, everything we've talked about. You got to start internally. You've got to have the people that are leading an organization able to buy in to these very simple, straightforward, clear expressions. If we just assume that people have alignment or understand things the same way, we will be wildly wrong. So I think, that's where you need to focus, is that sort of internal brand buy-in expert. You're the guru that makes the brand sing inside the walls.
Steve, I can't thank you enough. Do you have one last parting thought for our listeners, something they could do right now when they shut this down to start clarifying their brand?
I would say try to think, if you have a problem with being in the jar you're in, that's understandable. But if you can think of one metaphor, one way, so that you're going to meet somebody in a coffee shop and they're going to answer the question, what do you do? Is there a single sentence? Is there a single image? Is there a single metaphor that you can use that will create that aha moment for a regular person? That is the most crucial, what I call the first moment of truth. If you can get a message across in the first 15 to 30 seconds in that first moment of truth, then there's the chance that in the second moment of truth, when they're talking to somebody that they could refer you to, that they're going to remember you. And that's why I look at the importance of being referral ready, because referrals are the best way to get business. And we've got to get our first moments of truth working so that we can activate that second moment of truth.
Without a doubt. No, Steve, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and absolutely your wisdom and your guidance on my own business of story. And I hope others were able to apply that to their world.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Park.
And Steve is big on not only clarity, but using that clarity for referrals, as he just said. If you liked what you heard on this show, refer this episode to family, friends, a colleague, someone you know who's out there struggling and they want to, as Steve said, they're hungry to be successful, but they haven't really clarified who they are and what they're about. They haven't clarified their story. Share this program with them, because I know it's going to be their first step to do that. And by all means, make sure you refer them to Steve's book, Clarity Wins. Get heard, get referred. You'll probably become their new best friend once they get through that. And I want to thank you for being here and enjoying another episode of The Business of Story. Of course, if I can be of service to you, you know where to find me, businessofstory.com. And return next week when we will have another amazing story artist like Steve right here on The Business of Story to help you clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life. And of course, until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thank you for listening.